Hello, everybody, and welcome to our weekly webinar here at Route Consultant. We are excited you're here. Hope you had a great Valentine's Day and/or enjoyable Super Bowl party. If you do that, if you've not been here before, my name is Jesse Smith. I'm the operations director for Pat Logistics and an operations consultant for Route Consultant. You may have seen me on some of our YouTube videos, or if you're a regular attendee, you've probably seen me on a previous webinar. Glad to be here. I've got a special guest coming up here in a few minutes. So welcome back to our people who have been here before, new attendees. Glad to have you. We're going to try to have some fun here today. We're going to try to educate you, and we're also going to ask a question of the day. So be ready for that. I'm going to talk about that here in a second. Before I go any further, I've got to read a disclaimer. So I'm going to get through this here. Route Consultant is not endorsed by, it is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. So all that means you're not going to hear any materially, easy for me to say, non-public information today, but we do hope you find some material helpful information to help you as a FedEx Ground contractor, or if you're getting into the space to kind of learn more about it and what we do. So anyway, as I said, question of the day, if you've been here before, we are going to have you answer a question for us before you ask a question. So you can put in a question at any time. Make sure you use the Q&A feature of the webinar, not the chat feature. We may not see it if it goes in chat. The question that you need to answer today for us, and my guest and I will answer this for you as well. What is your most romantic Valentine's Day tradition and why? So be thinking about that. As I said, use the Q&A button. You can put those in at any time. We're going to do some content, and then at the end, we will get to those questions. First come, first serve. So in a few minutes, I'm going to bring on my co-host and our guest today. He's one of my favorite co-hosts, one of my favorite people, actually. It's my dad, Greg Smith. You've seen him before, maybe on a webinar or in some videos. We've got his face out there a lot. He's the training director here at Route Consultant. He's an industry veteran, loves to share his insights with you guys. Love to have him on, and we get to tag team and do this together. It's always a lot of fun, so I think you'll get a lot out of hearing him. We're going to talk about the AO-BC relationship. And if you're not familiar with what that is, that's basically the AO is the business owner and the BC is the day-to-day operations manager. So the importance of that relationship is just extremely crucial for your success as an owner. So we want to talk about some ways to kind of help that relationship thrive and to see you both be as happy as you can and as profitable as you can in this space. Before I do that, a couple other things to get to. We have events coming up, some super exciting ones. We've got next week, we've got our San Diego Roadshow. Okay, this is February 23rd is the Roadshow. Day before that, we have Happy Hour, same place, both in San Diego. So Southern California, looking forward to seeing you there. I'll be there along with several other members of our team. Ground Cloud's going to be there. Really excited about that. We've got our in-person summit coming up next month. That's March 6th and 7th here at our location in Nashville. Love those. Just one of our favorite events that we all do here. Would love to see you there. If you're looking to get in the space, we can teach you everything you want to know and more about what it is to be a FedEx contractor. We have a next month also at the end of the month on March 30th, we have a line haul specific roadshow. That's going to be in Kansas City. So if you're interested in the line haul space or you're already a line haul contractor, come see us in Kansas City next month. And then finally, last but not least, we have our expo July 29th and 30th in Las Vegas, and registration is now open. So you'll see the links to all those in the chat to be able to sign up for those if it's something you're interested in. We hope to see you at any or all of those. We also have some inventory to get to. We've got one new listing today I want to tell you about real quick. This is an Amazon opportunity. It's in North Carolina, 22 to 34 DSP routes. As you know, with Amazon, you kind of have that range there, depending on the volume. This is at $800,000 listing, 21.36% of revenue, 6% EBITDA margin. It comes with one manager. It is an efficient operation with great growth potential. If you know anything about North Carolina, that's a great area to get into. Amazon also provides a full service lease program to reduce variable vehicle expense. Current DSP has won the DSP of the month 3 times. So good value out there. And then the territory has available parking and many individual homes in it. So with that, Dad, if you want to go ahead and come on, we're going to launch into our content portion. And I'm going to share my screen. All right. Dad, tell us a little bit about yourself and your favorite parts about being in the space. And we'll get to the question of the day a little bit later, but just go ahead and give us a quick intro of you, and then we'll launch into this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jess. It's great to be here. Appreciate all of you coming alongside. We got a really interesting topic today, really timely. It seems like something we encounter on a regular basis. Sometime in the operation, whether it be initially an issue with the AO and the BC, just trying to get them on the same page and getting the BC to buy into what the AO is about. And it's just going to really make for a long-term, super successful, super profitable. I just don't honestly think, Jesse, we can overemphasize this relationship enough. So I had opportunity myself to be an AO. Was a contractor in Columbia, Tennessee. I started out on the home delivery only side, went through the genesis of the ISP contract, and then sold my operation to Spencer, and then came to work for him, and went from being a BC and a transition manager to eventually being a regional manager, and then coming in here back in August into route consultant, and we spent several months putting together our P&D playbook, which basically is a kind of a composition of both of ours operational experience over the last 18 years in this space. And so just really now it's just a great opportunity to get to I talk to 10 to 12 contractors a week, just talking with them about just trying to help them make their business better. And so that's what we're here today to do. So get your questions ready. If you're looking to get into this space, and hopefully we'll explain to you the importance of this relationship. If you've been here a while, certainly we want to answer those questions as well. But even beyond this, please let us know if we can help you with anything on this topic or any others operationally. And if we can't find it out, we'll find someone who can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Dad, great to have you here in town. Actually, it's great to be able to see you. So yeah, I mean, as you said, you really can't overstate the importance of the owner's relationship with the BC, with the operations manager. I mean, current contractors know this. I mean, you can have a great fleet strategy, you can have the best DRO set up, you can have everything in a row, and if your manager is not willing to execute your efficiency goals and your plans for the business, it really just doesn't matter. If you can't keep them accountable and have a good two-way open line of communication, it really all just it really does depend on that in terms of if you're going to succeed in the space, you got to have this part nailed down. So let's talk about, it's one thing that we love about Spencer, right, is he kind of gets into the psychology of the different people, what motivates them, what gets them out of bed in the morning, what for the AO and the BC. Dad, let's talk about specifically what is a definition of success that both of them use. We've kind of distilled it down here into 3 things. So kind of give the AO version of this, and then I'll give the BC, and then we'll kind of compare notes on this.
Sure, absolutely. So obviously, anybody that's investing in this space, Jesse, and I just might add one thing real quickly going in as introduction is, if you're a remote owner of one of these operations, even more critical things we talk about today are probably magnified by a factor of maybe 2 or 3, something like that. But certainly, we get into business to turn a profit, right? I mean, even when I was a BC for Spencer, I would never, people would talk about different things, drivers, and I would say, listen, I never hid from that. Okay. And so this is a great business opportunity for so many people. And so, they just need to understand that. And I think sometimes the business contact can potentially lose sight of that, I would often use the phrase, hey, if I don't make a profit this week, you don't have a job next week. Okay. It really turns out to be that simple. And then efficiency, certainly with the metal program that's come into this space, the efficiency piece is probably going to be magnified. Would you agree, more than it has been probably since in any time we've been in this business? FedEx before is like, we don't really care how many trucks you run. You know, if you want to run too many, that's on you. Now that's being looked at. And then, you know, sometimes we all kind of have a tendency, I think, to say if silence means everything's going okay. And so sometimes an authorized officer will get lulled into maybe a false sense of security that maybe all things are going well, when in fact, just because they haven't heard from FedEx or from somebody about something negative doesn't mean that there might be something brewing. So just to you know, some tips here to kind of help them stay alert.
Yeah. Yeah. And then as a BC, you know, I spent 3 years as a BC myself. It's just stress management is the number one name of the game. You know, if you can get through the day in one piece, you've had a successful day, you know. And so it's you're not always going to be thinking in terms of, okay, did I run the most efficient route plan? You know, you're thinking, did I get out all the boxes out the door? You know, do I have extra drivers to cover so that I don't have to get on a truck and just, you know, greatly expand my stress level? You know, as you're trying to think, it almost becomes a survival mentality in some situations for BCs, just because it can be so high pressure. And, you know, a big part of that too is the avoiding the conflict, you know, the hard conversations that you will have daily with FedEx, and just really trying to stay off their radar as much as possible, and not have a confrontation that's going to lead to, you know, you better get this cleaned up, or you better do this or that. You know, just avoiding those situations and those conversations with FedEx is a big part of that. So, you know, at the end of the day, a lot of these positions are going to be salary positions. That's very common for a BC, is to have a salary pay. And so, you know, they're not often motivated overly much by the profit goals. And so that's why a lot of times, Dad, we'll see contractors will give their BCs maybe $100 bonus or something if they reach the payroll as a percent of gross revenue. If they can keep it below a certain number of payroll positions, they get a bonus that week, right? Because sometimes it really does take that extra bit of money to kind of get them out of look, we got all the boxes off the belt, all the trucks rolled out, it's a successful day. No, it's not always a successful day. If you ran 3 too many trucks, honestly, that's, you know, we're not here to just automatically give people a job without making money too, right? So keeping those things in tension is really, that's the part that you got to manage in this relationship. That's really the most critical piece. So Dad, let's look at some specifics here. You know, recognizing your point of view, let's kind of maybe take 30 seconds for each of these and talk about the authorized officer's view versus the business contact view. And current contractors in the space, you're reading this and you're like, oh yeah, that's me to a T. And I can definitely relate to that. But so some of these are really going to resonate. Others, if you're just looking at it for the first time, like, man, that's an issue. Yeah, just kind of be aware. These are a lot of the conversations, or unfortunately, sometimes the unspoken conversations that should happen, but don't. So we'll talk about kind of how to bridge the gap in a second. But Dad, go through these kind of line by line and talk about when the authorized officer says something, that's not always what the business contact hears.
Absolutely. And I literally, Jesse, I told you when I was trying to develop this, you know, one of the things I learned early on, and even probably when I was a parent, I actually probably started learning some of this. I didn't learn it very well, and you can do your own.
I won't comment on that.
Yeah, you'll 30 seconds for rebuttal here in a minute. But anyway, you know, one of the things that's really important in any kind of relationship, right, is being able to see what's going on from the other person's point of view. So when I was working on this content, I literally, in my office at home, I put a second chair in. I would bounce back and forth between the two, because some of these are just inherent in what happens when a new owner comes into a business, or maybe if an owner is away from a business for a while and things change, because we know they can change rapidly in this space, right? And so we're just going to go through these real quickly. But, you know, as a new owner, especially coming in, or maybe a year in, they're excited about their business venture. But, you know, from the business context point of view, you know, they have very little say about what's going to happen, whether or not this business is going to turn over. Maybe they've been doing a really, really good job themselves, and all of a sudden, you know, boom, I wake up tomorrow and I've got a new boss. So, and that's not necessarily a positive or a negative, but I think it's just, you know, we all are somewhat resistant to change, right? And so I think if, you know, basically, as we go through this list, if the guy on the left can understand the stuff on the right and vice versa, that's kind of what we're after, right? You know, certainly a lot of these, a big investment, people have taken personal savings and different things to invest in this business. And the business contact doesn't have any money, any skin per se in the game, right? But they will always come to the fact that, listen, I know what I'm doing because I've done this a long time. Okay, valid. Okay, authorized officer, ultimately things are going to rise and fall with what FedEx does with their contract on them, right? Whereas the business contact they know their territory, they know DRO, they know their drivers, they know their team. And just go on down through here. I'm not going to hit all of these. One of them that is one that we talk about from time to time, the sixth one there, that it doesn't seem like my BC does anything but dispatch. And there's some days where, literally because they're not there. And that's why we encourage, especially early on in these business ventures, for the AOs to get there and to shadow. And we'll talk about that in the remedy section here in just a second, but get in there and see what they do. Because I mean, you've heard me use the illustration many times about, by the end of the day, we're feeling like we're being chased by a pack of chihuahuas, right? We have all these little tasks that just seem to come after us. Sometimes we'll come in, as we all do, we have expectations of what we think people know. We'll talk about how to remedy that one, the whole communication thing. And then we already kind of hit on it earlier about the silence means all is going well. Not necessarily so, right?
Yeah. And the thing with DRO there, I will hit that real quick. If you're new to the space, that's dynamic route optimization. That's the way that you plan and set up your route plan for the next day. It's basically the sortation of the boxes, what boxes go to which truck that are parked in the FedEx terminal. So a lot of times, I mean, I see a lot of things over here, Dad, in the business contact side that, that we kind of are maybe painting it as there's a good and a bad side of this, just like on the other side. But, if a BC comes back to you as the owner and says, well, I know DRO, you want them to know DRO. You want them to be intimately acquainted with it.
Absolutely.
A lot of these things, you want them to know their drivers and have a great relationship with them. The territory, I mean, what do we always say? There's really no substitute for route knowledge. If you don't have a BC that knows your routes inside and out, then you probably need a different BC. So these are all components that have to be there. The rub is when they use these things as sort of an excuse to not grow or adapt into the profit and efficiency model that the owner needs to see in order to, again, like you said, meet the requirements, the skin in the game. Like, I've made an investment, I need to see a return. If the BC uses these things as an excuse, this is where this kind of gets a little bit toxic. Yeah. So let's talk about the sort of the bridging the gap. We have a potential issue here where a BC is being stubborn, or on the other side, the owner may not know as much as they should. They need to maybe get their feet a little bit more wet in the business and see the day-to-day operations a little more clearly, and maybe from the ground level. So let's go through here and talk about, if you've got an issue in communication in one of these ways, how do you bridge that gap?
Yeah, then this is the part we're most excited about, right, Jesse? We're not all about calling out the problems. Anybody can look at that and see that happens. Here's how we're going to fix it. And these will work. Okay, these are not things we just pulled out of some seminar from somewhere else. These are ones we have used, in our decades of doing this. Okay, and the communication of expectation. And this is not something that's just an initial thing for a new owner in this space. If there's ever a time where things seem to be breaking down, or the communication doesn't seem to flow as smoothly as it should, it's probably this one right here. It's probably in there. Here again, you pointed out earlier, which is exactly right. A lot of these we could reverse, right?
Yeah.
So maybe the business contact has expectations of the authorized officer, and the authorized officer isn't doing that, but he didn't know that it was the expectation of the BC, right? Yeah. So really, a lot of these will, as you correctly stated earlier today, these will really cross over. But the first one is it's just so crucial. If you feel like you're having a difficult time, or if you're new coming in this space, I can't emphasize enough. AO, BC has some time, probably away from the building, probably over some food or something non-alcoholic to drink. I just put that one in because you do want to remember what you talk about. Okay, and just take the time to communicate. Here's how I see it. Okay. And then the second part of that is so crucial, is to schedule the regular check-in calls. So if you're trying to develop the communication, have a time where you're going to do that. Okay. And that way, if something is still being, it's still unclear, the BC can ask questions, right? But the BC can't say, well, the driver called off. I'm too busy today. I can't take the call. We can't, there has to be give and take. The AO probably has a busy day that day too, and other things scheduled around the check-in call, right? So, just take the time to honor each other and make sure that communication happens.
Yeah, the one that we did kind of transpose here, Dad, was the halfway down the list there. Have a teachable spirit, exercise patience, have a teachable spirit. I mean, you can't, that's one of the things that we say. There's so many things about the BC role that you can teach, but only if they have a teachable spirit. So that's almost it's sort of a nature versus nurture question. If you're BC, they got to have that. I mean, along with the, they have to be a borderline workaholic. We always say that, right? To succeed at the job, they've got to have that. They've got to have buy-in.
They've got
to have that. Yeah, they've got to have that teachable spirit, because, there's things that the AO has got to be able to sort of replicate himself and his goals, or herself, in the BC. And if that's not allowed to happen, because again, like you said it before, if they've got, I've got more experience in the industry, I've been a driver for 20 years and you're a new owner, that conversation you can't allow that to essentially derail all the goals that you have, right? You just, that cannot happen. Yeah. And of course, as DRO, the freak that I am, loving DRO, I've got to bring it back to that. This is a big one, Dad. I mean, the DRO decision-making process, let's park on that for a second, because when a BC is going in and deciding, hey, we're going to run a 9-truck plan tomorrow, and you as the owner know that you need to do it in no more than 7 routes, that's a problem, and sometimes there's going to be ways you figure out how to meet at 8. And there's going to be times when you say, look, I'm going to override you here, and we're going to have to run a 7-route plan. And there's going to be some times where the BC says, look, I've given you this reason, and this reason. We really can't do that, or we will lose drivers. You got to know how to call BS, for lack of a better word, on your manager when he gives you these reasons. And so the only way to do that is to know how DRO works yourself. And if you can't get in there and audit his process, you don't have any way to know if he's kind of feeding you a line. So kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So just for the record, I went 24 minutes in before I told a story. Okay. So I know, but you probably
that's a new record. Yes.
This is a perfect example of learning together and explaining things, the decision-making process together. And after all, the AO and the BC have to be a team, right? And so one of the best ways, if you remember, we had an operation, we made a BC change, and you came in and we rented just a little conference room with a big screen TV in a hotel room. And you came in, and I guess the new BC and the 2 lead drivers were there, and I was there, kind of a representative of the company, and just the transition. And we spent a couple hours, we ate pizza together, and we just went through and started learning DRO together. Yep. And it just was so helpful. And then beyond that, I know you've done that in other operations where you'll go in, and then for a period of probably 2 to 3 weeks, every night you'll have just a quick, 15 to 20 minute check-in call with the players involved, lead drivers, the BCs. And so you're learning it together. And so, and that goes beyond just the fact that we're learning DRO, right? It's you're learning the other people. And that's the real fun part of this. We always come back to that as a company. It's one of the things here that's just a real culture issue for us is, life is too short not to enjoy life with the people that you work with, right? And so that's where you get to do that together. And it's, you'll have things and you'll ask questions and somebody will make a silly comment, but you'll remember those, right? Because you were working together toward a common goal. And that should, it's just a perfect way to, for the new AO coming in to learn it, or both of you probably teaching each other as you spent time in DRO. I mean, I'm sure you're still learning stuff from time to time. You'll get with a contractor somewhere, you'll learn something, right?
Yeah. And then this last one, Dad, I want to kind of end with this. It's a perfect spot because you've kind of been developing some stuff yourself in leadership training. And this is a big key that we just do not, I don't know of a single contractor out there. There probably are some, but this whole personality test thing, it's like, it's maybe it seems like a throwaway thing, right? But I mean, there's some pretty surprising major benefits. I mean, just as an example, Dad, a few weeks ago, you sent me a personality test to take. And I was honestly pretty shocked at how well it described some things about me. And you start thinking about that and not only yourself, but how pieces of yourself and parts of your personality will interact with other personalities. I mean, this could be a potential game-changing thing if this is more of the norm, because you're not going to have the breakdown of communication so many times that we see. Try this out. I mean, just kind of, when you're thinking about that, Dad, kind of take me through where that came from with you and why this is so important.
Well, I'm working on a book project right now, and that was one of the chapters in it was on blind spots. And as I was doing some research, I found this resource that was a blind spot test. And I think, Jesse, it was either 20 or 25 couplets. There were like 4 words. Yep. And you had to pick the one of the 4, yep, which described you the best. And it took you, what did it take you to take that test?
Oh, maybe 10 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I took it myself, and I got the results back, and I was just so surprised. It's like 7 or 8 pages, remember, of a printout from this test. And then I had you take it, and then you and I talked back and forth, and we were just amazed at how accurate it was at describing us the way that we were. And then also beyond that, remember, it gave us some suggestions on what to do, like when you're working with other people, or, you know, when you get stressed, kind of how you'll react and that kind of thing. And so I just think it would be invaluable even if you and your BC have been working together for a long time. I just think anytime you can get to know each other better, I just think it's going to really have the potential to strengthen your working relationship, because, you know, knowing how the other person thinks and how they're going to react, because there are going to be difficult times anytime we're in any kind of a business environment, right? We're going to encounter those difficult times, and this can really help you, really help you. So stay tuned for the future. We are going to be bringing something out here that's going to incorporate this.
Yeah. I'm going to end with a story of my own, Dad. I don't normally do that, but as we kind of close out this content portion, you know, it's really interesting. I'm going to get really raw here for a second with everybody, just because you're here. You know, I was your driver for many years, you know, I think about 8 or 9 years. And in that time, we definitely had our ups and downs, right? I mean, it was not always easy. And there was a time when you kind of approached me about wanting to be a manager for you.
Right.
And, you know, just kind of where I was in life, you know, I was still kind of maturing a little, and, you know, I was not ready to step into that role. I didn't want to step into that role. So I just want to put a special, you know, announcement out there for people that, you know, if you're working with your family members, especially, I mean, that we do see that quite a bit in the space, actually, brothers, cousins, husband and wife, we see a lot of family in this. This part right here, Dad, I think if we had some sort of assessment for our different personalities and like kind of show us wide open, like, oh, this is why we're not getting along, or we have this kind of barrier between us. I don't think we can really recommend that highly enough.
Totally agree. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, you're exactly right. You hit it right on the head. It doesn't matter what type of relationship you're in with that person, being a family member or a close friend or whatever it is. I think you could both benefit from, and here again, like we started talking about earlier, being able to see it from the other person's point of view, right? So critical for a successful relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's go ahead, Dad, and let me get this over here. All right, so we are going to now get into our Q&A. And again, if you forgot, the question of the day today is, what is your most romantic Valentine's Day tradition and why? Dad, I'm going to ask you, and then I'll answer, and then we'll kind of open it up to Q&A. But what is your most romantic Valentine's Day tradition that you have?
Well, with one caveat. So I promise to tell you what mine is, if you promise not to call your mother and ask her if she would say the same thing. So,
I promise. All these people can keep me accountable.
Yeah, exactly. So when we first got started, we were not wealthy at all by any means. We were in college together, and we were struggling financially to kind of get by. And so really all we could afford were on Sundays, our dates were many Sundays after we went to church, we would come back and we would buy a loaf of bread, and we'd have some peanut butter and some jelly, and we would sit down and have peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And so just to remember where we've come from, We normally at Valentine's Day is a time when we renew that tradition. And we do it other times throughout the year. But we just go back to that to remember all the good times where, it wasn't money. It wasn't a lot of other external things that people put emphasis on that make a relationship last. But by God's grace, May the 20th of this year, we will hit number 39 for our wedding anniversary. So we just like to go back and remember what the simple days were like. And we still can't agree. She still thinks strawberry jelly's better. And I know grape is superior, but maybe we could do that as a question one day, right?
Yeah.
What's better on the peanut butter jelly sandwiches? So
yeah. So my answer, I'm going to go a complete opposite end of the spectrum here. And my personality, this is not going to be a shock, but I'm going to go real simple. I don't care where I go out to eat, but the food is always going to be my favorite. So I know it's going to be nice whether I'm taking my girl out or she's taking me out. This past week, we went out to Longhorns, one of my favorites. So I just look forward to the food. If I can have an excuse, I will take a holiday as an excuse, if for no other reason, to go out and eat some good food. So whatever it is, that's mine.
It's impossible to have a bad date with good food, isn't it?
It's real hard. You got to try. Yeah. So, all right, Dad, we got a good question here from James Flynn. So I'm going to kick this over to you. So my children are almost 30 and I still send them gifts every year. Always a reminder their dad loves them. I love that. So his
Great
question, Dad, volume is down and I can't keep a full-time BC anymore. How can a lead driver help take a little of the load off of me? What should I ask them to do? How much extra pay? Great question.
Yeah, that is a really good question, James. And I'm sorry. I appreciate your honesty and transparency and coming to us with that. Thank you. And you're being a great dad. So that's going to pay you the big dividends, whether we give you the right answer here or not today. Kudos to you. Thank you for sharing that with us. The lead driver, and certainly, so Jesse, we've talked about many times about our lead driver should be our BC in training anyway. And so if we don't have a BC, then obviously there would be more of those responsibilities that we would see. I guess the short answer let me take the pay part and I'll come back to the other. So I guess you would have to determine how many additional hours you think he is going to work with those additional responsibilities that you're giving him. Because if you're just shifting responsibilities, in other words, if he was driving 4 days a week, now he's only going to drive 2 days a week, but you're giving him other administrative responsibilities, you really haven't increased his workload, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's really based on what you would kind of view as, how many hours do you view as a solid work week for a driver? What do you view that for as a lead? And then what do you view that for as a BC?
Sure.
And then you'd have to slot that in based on where he or she falls in that category. To me, that would be the fairest way. And that would be the way, if I was James and I was explaining that to my lead driver, I would do that. But you probably know where we're going first, right? If I'm going to share a responsibility, what are we going to share him with first?
DRO.
Exactly. Yeah, go ahead with that.
Yeah, so that's really important anyway, whether you can justify a full-time BC or not, you need to have multiple users trained on DRO anyway, just in case, because we've seen kind of the nuclear option honestly has been used on us before in our companies. We have seen it where a BC gets control of it. And, there was an unfortunate situation. I was actually a lead driver who had BC access. And unfortunately, when that lead driver was let go, because it was kind of turning into a toxic situation, he went in and deleted all of our route plans except for one. And he claimed that they were his intellectual property because he was the one spending most of the time, most of the effort setting up the route plans, drawing into anchor areas. So you absolutely need someone to take that load off. And even if it's just for the weekend to where your BC can have some extra time. Again, I just, can't emphasize that enough. That's where I would start. Just get a list from your BC of the full range of responsibilities and just see take stock of that and say, I can take this off. I can take this off. I can put these on drivers. And you might have multiple lead drivers in a small team that are essentially making up the remainder of what you're taking out of your BC pay. You can backfill it there. If you think in terms of the total bucket, the total spend that you want, then just allocate that across your team as much as you need to, maybe based on skill set, interest, or whatever. There's nothing against having multiple drivers that can, maybe one just comes in and dispatches on the weekends, right? That's all they do. They run a route themselves and they dispatch. If you, especially with a small operation, if you only send 2-3 trucks out on a Saturday or Sunday, it's not a problem, right? It's really easy to keep up with that few routes. So that's how I would say there, Dad. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I always look at, we all have our strengths and weaknesses, right, Jesse? So there's certain parts of what you were a BC that you really enjoyed doing. And so now I think I heard from the question, he doesn't have a BC, right? He is having to give those.
He said he can't keep a full-time BC anymore.
Okay, I got you. So, rather than, I guess if I was James, I would look at what do I not feel gifted at, or what do I not enjoy doing?
Yeah.
And so obviously he's going to have to pick up the slack of the things. If the BC isn't as full-time as he was, either the lead driver is going to do those, or James is going to do them himself as AO. So I would pick first, right? And I would pick the ones I feel like I'm strong at, that I enjoy doing, that, I can bring the most value to the company. And then these other ones be the ones, that's how I probably fill out the list of what I would get this lead to do. And then, but I would also look at the giftedness of that lead too, right? If we got somebody that, doesn't know how to reset the time on their VCR, that's probably not going to be our tech guru, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So look at their strengths, and it's amazing how the teams kind of come together. We've seen that time and time again, haven't we? Where, between blending the strengths and the weaknesses. So that's how I would look at it. Take the responsibilities, see what you like, take those, and then the other ones, try to find out where you can fit them in with existing personnel.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, next one, Dad, from an anonymous attendee. Got a couple of those today. Answer to the question: too old to celebrate Valentine's Day, so we just wish each other happy Valentine's Day, and that's it.
Okay.
Minimum is good, right? So question, I pay my drivers a fixed daily rate. FedEx has asked me for a payroll audit and want me to tell them the hourly rate I'm paying to all my drivers. Do we have to pay the drivers by the hour? And if we pay a fixed daily wage, how do we go about the audit? Good question. I'll take that one real quick. And before I give a full-throated answer to that, I'm going to give kind of a minimalist answer just so I don't say anything that's wrong. Reach out to us here. I would talk to Josh Gregory, our consulting director, about this one. Danielle, if you don't mind, could you put Josh's email in there so someone can reach out to him about this? But no, you do not have to pay the drivers by the hour unless your state requires it. One thing we have seen people do before, and I'm not necessarily advising this, but you can consider your fixed daily wage based on an 8-hour day, and then just basically do the math and divide it out from there. Now, again, I'm not saying that is going to be the solution that they're looking for, and I would reach out to us to kind of get a firm answer on that before you do that. But that's one way I've seen it done before. That could potentially, whatever the fixed daily wage is divided by 8, and that's your hourly wage. Again, reach out to us, make sure that'll work for you in your market and in your state. But again, that's kind of you do not have to pay hourly. I can answer that part unless it is required by your state. Okay. Rory, he missed what the question of the day was, but any suggestions on personality tests to take? That's a good one for you, Dad.
Wow, there's a bunch of them out there. And these are not an endorsement. So I just want to be really, really clear. I just know that there's some that I have taken. One that comes to mind is the Myers-Briggs. I know that's kind of a gold standard with a lot of counselors that are out there. There's one by, there's a guy out in Oklahoma City that's a pastor, but he's multi-site churches. So he's really branched off into leadership. His name is Craig Crochelle, and he has one there that I've taken as well that is really, really helpful. And there's a lot of them out there. I just don't know of one specifically. And then another one that we have actually used internally is one with the Enneagram, which is more of a newer one. I mean, the Enneagram has been around a long time, but if you're familiar with that concept and that book, that was required reading for everybody. And that one was helpful as well for me. Yeah. Probably the most helpful part of that one was when people get stressed, they kind of, in some tendencies, some ways, their personality changes, which was really, really insightful for me. I actually got that when I went from leading drivers to leading managers, which was a whole new dynamic. And anyway, but those would be where I would go, right off the top of my head.
Yeah, good. All right, Dad, got one from Tim Fincham, and I love his answer here. Maybe this is why I've been single so long. I don't have a tradition. Okay. Current owner lives afar and only at the terminal occasionally. I plan to be hands-on for the first 4 to 6 months. Okay, so Tim is getting into the space or assuming a new contract here. Do you have any tips for this situation? Great question, Tim.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Tim, and thank you, man. We appreciate it. Come on in. The water's fine. Okay, it's great, Tim. I really just want to commend you, first of all, for just taking the time this far out to already start making preparations. You are setting yourself on a tremendous path. And wow, I can't wait to walk through this journey with you and see where it goes. But, everybody has different times when they want to have that relationship start to develop between the AO and the BC. I just always think the sooner the better. Obviously, it's going to depend on the BC's ability to keep things confidential. And obviously, I would rely upon the seller to give me the advice on that, because certainly you don't want that information going out prematurely. Okay. But just time, Tim, there's no substitute. We live in this day and time where, a lot of electronic communication, and that's good. I'm not saying that's all bad, but the face-to-face at a restaurant, at a coffee shop or whatever, just to get to know each other. Do not let that go by the wayside or minimize the impact that could have. I just think you can, what is the percentage, Jesse? Is it 45% of communication is nonverbal, or maybe it's more than that?
More than that. Yeah. I think it's like 80-90%. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're going to read so much more from the person. Zoom calls are great. I'm learning to adapt to those. But the face-to-face is just so important. And I would, here again, I would begin, Tim, if I was you. We talk about communicating expectations. I would start writing those down if I were you, Tim. And I would just kind of find a way that I could go through and systematically go through that list. And I would probably, if I was doing this again, Tim, I would have some questions that I wanted when the time came for my BC to go through, and then let me get those. And, it's possible that you could go through the seller of your current business, and he could maybe introduce himself and his BC taking a personality test themselves. And unbeknownst to you, he could pass off the one from the BC that you're going to inherit, and you get a leg up with that too. So I think, you're on the right track being proactive here, and get there and just learn. It's important to learn the aspects of the business. That is true. But don't short sell learning about your BC. That's going to really, as we've said over and over again, Jesse, haven't we, about it's the number one key to profits in this space.
Yeah, I will give you a word of caution here too, Tim. If if the owner is living remote, that can either be a good thing or a bad thing, or maybe a mix of both. There will be some things that the BC that you're getting is they're going to be bringing in some habits. I'll just say that. So if there's things they're maybe used to being able to get away with, I would be on the lookout for things like that. Just maybe they're used to saying, I make the DRO decisions, and my owner, he's never in town. And so he just basically rolls with it, so that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It could be. And this is what, at Patent Logistics, this is what had happened. We had a great relationship with home office. So there wasn't a lack of communication between what the goals were of the company were and the field. But that it's not that can't happen. And so that's something to look out for. Make sure that if the owner's remote, maybe dig into that a little bit, see why they're remote. Again, they live afar, so that they can't always be there, but maybe figure out, hey, how often are they going to the terminal? Why are you only going there this often? Why don't you go more? Why are you not going less? Yeah. Maybe there's something there, maybe there's not, but dig into the habits of your BC, kind of like you said, Dad. Figure out why they're doing what they're doing, and maybe blind spots, right? What they can do that they're getting away with, and things that you might have to dig in with them a little bit on, a little deeper.
Yep.
Okay, got another anonymous here, Dad. Now that we have kids, we include our children on our Valentine's Day dinner each year, which saves on babysitter too. Okay, great. Many contractors, they asked, many contractors and FedEx seem confused on the date to complete the certified training requirements for veteran drivers. So the qual cert stuff was originally told drivers who started with FedEx Ground prior to January 2021 had a year after a new contract to be certified. I'm now being told it changed to 45 days at some point, and I'm being asked for an LOA, a letter of assurance, to correct this. Safety, BDS, and my station management have conflicting views on this. Any insight? I will start here, Dad, then I'll kick it over to you. Yeah, I don't. This is one I'm not going to step in the middle of. I definitely empathize with you. You're getting that LOA. That is not a fun position to be in. I can't speak for the actual official answer to that because I don't know what your market is. All we ever tell contractors is, and we've said this for a year now, ever since QualCert rolled out, Patent Logistics was an early adopter of it, ASAP, just bottom line. Again, this is something that if you do this for your veteran drivers, it's a one and done, right? It's not like you're going to have to come back and do it again every year. Obviously, your new drivers are going to have to do it when they onboard. So that's going to be an ongoing thing. But your veterans, if you can get them in this week, get it done, knock it out, get it over with. And by the way, I will plug this. Bright Flag Recruiting has a really, really good solution here. If you're not able to pull a bunch of drivers off the road at once, we offer Bright Flag offers virtual classroom training taught by one of our in-house trainers here at Route Consultants. So we've partnered with them to kind of bring that to everybody. And the good thing about it is you can add multiple contractors' drivers into the same class. And so you don't have to worry about renting a space. It's a virtual class. You will have to have someone on site do the observed hours, but that's a whole lot easier than having to find the time and the space and the money to rent a place specifically for your drivers to go and get that classroom training. So that's an option you want. Reach out to us. We'd be glad to set that up with you. But yeah, Dad, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, and as far as the observed hours, you probably have multiple drivers that can take care of that, and that's also kind of a value add to those drivers potentially if they would be willing to do that for you on their days off. So that would be a way for you to get them. Yeah, I would collaborate with other contractors in the building, Jesse. If there's somebody else that has a CT that wants to do classes, as long as it's not cost prohibitive, I would certainly look at that. But yeah, you're right. One of the things we have always done as a company, which I think has always served us well, get it done as quickly as possible. Okay. And as soon as I say that, you may get your last driver through and a memo will come out the next day on My Ground Biz saying we've extended this another 60 days. Okay. We've seen it happen time and time again, haven't we? But regardless of that, it's off our plate. So, as you know, something else is going to come down the pike. So, to use the Larry the Cable Guy line, right? Just get her done. Yeah. That would be the best thing that I would have there. And like I say, let us help you. Give us a call on that letter assurance if you're unclear with that. If you'll give us a call, we'd love to help walk you through some of that detail as well. With that, I know that's not the end of the world. So don't take it as it's just part of what happens all too often these days. So let us help you, walk you through that, give you some peace of mind. We'd be glad to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, we got a great one right up our wheelhouse here. And this might take the remaining 10 minutes to answer. This is a big one, but so another anonymous, they say, we maintain a weekly date night. So Valentine's Day every week. Love that. Gotta keep it fresh, right? So as AO, they ask, I clearly communicate my daily volume projections along with my driver volume expectations to guide my BCs to target the right amount of routes to utilize each day. The problem is my BCs ignore these orders, even though there is weekly bonus money if they hit the goals. It's exasperating. We are large enough to have 2 BCs on most days. My expectation is to run aggressively so BCs can handle any surprises. Great advice, by the way. That's a great tactic. Also, is it reasonable to expect my BCs to be scheduled as a driver on some days? So I'll hit that second part, Dad. Then if you want to go back to the first part, no. For a large organization, do not schedule your BCs to be on a truck every day. if you're large enough that you can justify 2 BCs, I mean, we're talking, you should not have fewer than 20 routes a day to have 2 BCs. And honestly, for that, I would not even necessarily have 2 BCs. I'd have a main BC who should never be scheduled to be on a truck, and then a lead driver who maybe will take out a bulk route or something like that. If you can afford to have a half route, someone who may not necessarily be salary, to handle some of the extra volume if you do need an overflow route or something like that. No, I would not schedule my BCs, but Dad, and we're talking about how do you incentivize, man, money isn't even working here. How do we incentivize BCs to be efficient and profitable, even if there is that carrot hanging out there of a weekly bonus? That's not working. What do we do next?
Well, so you have several children. I assume this, or was it the one before that?
No, that was the one before.
That was wrong. Okay, I'm sorry. So there is incentivizing and there is de-incentivizing. Okay, can we use that word? So when I would raise my kids, sometimes there would be a carrot. Okay, sometimes there would be a negative reinforcement to a particular behavior, right? And I would always start out on the positive. So I would take my BCs aside and I say, listen, guys, here's where we are. And if you had dollar figures that you could attain to that, I'm not saying open your books up to them, but if you could show them the contrast maybe of a couple of days where we ran lean and correctly on payroll, and this was the bottom line of what the business made, and then the other days where we didn't do that, that's what we do on that BC report that we used to do every day with our guys. It'll clearly show where those leaks are. Okay. And then the second thing I would show them that. I'd be real honest with them about that. Then secondly, here again, let's get in the other seat, right? We're keep coming back to that. So I would just say, guys, listen, just be honest with me, because there's no wrong answers. I'm not going to try to defend myself, but just tell me what it is. When I tell you this is what I want and you don't do that, would you tell me what is your hesitancy? Why do you fail to do that? What is keeping you from following through on what I want? Okay. And then once those answers come in, Jesse, then you're gonna kind of know what do we have. Okay. And we've talked about this many times before. We had a BC who was excellent in many, many areas. But he always wanted to do what we call hedge his bet, right? He always wanted to keep a couple drivers in his back pocket, because he just did not under any circumstance want to run around himself.
Right.
If that's how your BC is, I get it. I understand. But until you know what those motivations are behind what they're doing, and some of them may be good. Okay. Maybe there's a personal issue going on with one of them at home that they want to make sure they're available for. I'm not saying that's an excuse. I'm just saying that's a different thing than just absolute, just blatant insubordination, right? We have some room for discussion and we have some room to work some things out. But at the end of the day, okay, we'll go back to what we started talking about. I think was number one on the first slide. Okay. If I don't make a profit today, you don't have a paycheck tomorrow. And it's really that simple. And as painful as it is to make BC transitions, it really doesn't matter. And I would just really emphasize that with my team. I don't want to do this, but I'm in business to make money, and I wouldn't shy away from that. And I would love to do it with this team that I have, because y'all do many things well. But it's just time for some honesty, some clear communication, get some feedback from them. And then once you get that information, I think you'll probably become clear what to do with it.
Yeah. Great insight there, Dad. You kind of nailed it right on the head, what I was going to say, which is, you got to get in there and figure it out yourself. And that again goes back to, you've got to know what a BS answer looks like, and again, you're not going in there just to run roughshod over the BC. And that doesn't sound like your approach whatsoever here. It's just that, you got to figure out whether you need the carrot or the stick here. The only way you know that is if you go in and you understand the metrics that they're talking about. If they try to lose you with verbiage and details and DRO, you got to be able to follow it. And you got to be able to stay with them, and just don't let them divert the conversation away from that. You got to know how to call BS if that's what it is, or if it's something else and they've got legitimate answers, you may have to find a way to cut in other areas. And then at the end of the day, Dad, we haven't really talked about this and we can't get into it right now, but there's going to be a time where you've done all you can do and you might have to find a new BC. And
Yep.
again, I'm not recommending that necessarily, but that's something that's on the table, because at the end of the day, they're not there to just make their own lives less stressful. They're there for you and for you to make money. If they can't execute your goals, at the end of the day, they may have to go. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And here again, this is something that I'd be glad. This is what I probably spend the vast majority of my time is in leadership development and problem solving with these, on a regular basis. Danielle, can you put Grayson's email address up there for us, please? If you'd like to talk with me more directly, this is the guy that does all my scheduling for me. I'd be glad to set up a time where we could, we could talk about that together, and just maybe probably like to do it after you kind of had this discussion. Give me as much information as we can, but you get a hold of Grayson. I think it's Grayson Rathbun is the guy that would do that, and he'll reach out to me and we'll try to set up a time where we can talk and try to work through this together. All this stuff, Jesse, just kind of to drop out to a 10,000 foot view. We want to help tailor this. We know everybody's individual situation is a little bit different. And so give us a chance to get to know more about what you're doing. And, we want to help you. We're not here just to do webinars and to do expos and things like that. Those are benefits. We love meeting contractors, but we would love a chance to talk with you and really whittle it down to what you need and to help you out to make you more successful. That's what gets us out of bed every day, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we love what we do here. Last two real quick, before we close, I'm gonna hit these real fast. Amjad Rashid, he didn't give a Valentine's answer here, but he wants to know, is there any weekly or bi-weekly meetings with FedEx regarding status/performance or any upcoming peak season? I'm planning to be remote, but I want to be on call if those kinds of meetings are done virtually. This is how I've managed remotely offshore engineers and stayed on track with projects. Amjad, I think if you're talking about peak planning, there's actually a couple of webinars that you get on that FedEx hosts on Zoom that you can kind of get your initial forecast and planning ideas together from them, and it's open Q&A at the end. In terms of your, staying up with the metrics on an ongoing basis, they like you to be there in person at least every now and then. If you can't, I'm sure the senior manager would be glad to set up some Zoom meetings, but it's going to depend on the individual senior manager. So you're going to need to get with your terminal to figure out if that's an option.
And some of that's probably to be determined, right, Jesse?
Yes.
As this metal things goes along, I think you're going to see more opportunity. But I will say most FedEx managers, if you request a meeting and you want to set up I don't know any of them, maybe I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you wanted to have a call with them every 2 weeks, they would be glad to give you 15, 20, 30 minutes to do that. They would, because that's rare.
Yeah. Last one here, Dad, then we're going to shut it down. So David asks, how do you pay our Valentine's Day tradition is a great romantic meal. Last night was shrimp risotto and ginger chili short ribs. How do you pay your current drivers for the time involved in getting their qual cert? David, good question. We just pay them a standard daily fixed wage, just whatever they would make that day. If they go for half a day, we'll pay them half a day, but in general, we're going to pay them exactly what they'd make if they ran a route for us. So y'all, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for being here. Dad, thanks for being on with us.
A lot of great questions. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been great. So anyway, thank you, everybody. We will see you hopefully next week. Have a great week.